Hello and welcome to Plugin Along, a stream dedicated to Lotro plugins. I'm seeing chat. I am going to catch up on that in just a moment. But first, a quick summary. Last time on Plugin Along, we were modifying the Soliloquy tracker ability for the Minstrel Buffs plugin. We used chat monitoring to know when we used Soliloquy of Spirit on a target, and we were able to create a new row for each target. But the rows never disappeared, even when all the buffs were gone. So today, we're going to implement the timeout feature, where rows drop off once all their timers are expired and we're out of combat. As always, feel free to jump into chat with your thoughts and questions. In the meantime, let me move some windows around here. Holy moly, so much chat. Let's see, hello, Shoreless Skies. Ken says, I'm also a new player, just a week or two in. I'm having a blast. Awesome. That one hippie was just thinking about this game. I miss it a lot. You're new. You don't be sorry that you're new. Hello. Welcome. This may be a little bit of a non-traditional stream. A lot of Lotro streamers love showing off the gameplay and all the cool things you can do in the game. For instance, right now, amongst everything else, we're in the middle of the Yule Festival here in Winterhome in Frostbluff. I am just looking down on all the peasants doing their chores. Well, I talk about plugins, and we write some code to see how that looks in the game. Hopefully that appeals to you. If not, don't worry about it. It will not hurt my feelings. This is a very niche stream, and I recognize that. All right. Little Redhead says, love all the new players and longtime players. Absolutely. This game has such persistence. There's people who have been here for over a decade, and there's people who just started this week. And there's a wonderfully supportive community of people where you can just jump into world chat and say, I do not understand this thing, what's going on? And so many people will jump in and say, oh, here's a thing, oh, here's a useful link to the wiki, here's some more information. Really very encouraging of everyone who wants to jump in and see this, frankly, astonishingly large world, this imagining of Tolkien's work. So, awesome. Ken says, I managed to get up to 260 Yule tokens today, aiming for 500. Oh, good luck. After the first couple of days, I don't get more than about 100 tokens unless I'm really working on a character, except, let me have a quick diversion from plugins. If you have a wallet feature, which I think most people who have spent any sort of money on Lotro have access to this, you can go talk to the In-League and Ale Association NPCs during festivals. And by doing their delivery quest, you can earn badges of taste and badges of dishonor. And you can trade these in for boxes of festival tokens. It's a box, you open it up, and you can just pick which type of token you want. Midsummer tokens, Yule tokens, that sort of thing. And so there are 11 quests that you can do for each side to deliver drinks throughout Eriador. So you have to build, if you want to do them all, you have to be able to get to Forachel and Misty Mountains, but you can even do some of them just in the Shire. And so you can do 11 for each side, and it takes 2 badges to turn in for a box. So essentially you can get 11 boxes per day, and there's 12 tokens for Yule in there, which gives you 132 Yule tokens extra each day that you do a full sweep of deliveries. So if you have, especially if you have a hunter, you can knock out the whole delivery in about half an hour, and that can really boost your token acquisition. We've been doing that, and because we have our Fateful toolkits, that was part of the Ultimate Fan Bundle Edition from Fate of Gundabad, there's a 10% bonus on festival tokens, and In-League and Ale Association are festival tokens. So they get boosted for that as well. Okay, so that's just a great thing to have in the back of your head. Maybe you're having no problem getting Midsummer tokens, but you're not sure about those Harvest Math tokens. Well, have some extra badges of Dishonor and Taste just sitting around. Trade them in at your leisure for when, basically the last day of the festival. Oh man, I'm 500 tokens short. Okay, go spend a bunch of badges. So it's nice. And badges of Dishonor and Taste have no cap. So you can just stock up hundreds of them if you want to. I don't think the yield tokens have a cap either, except I keep spending mine on cosmetic pets. So I effectively have a cap of about 75, and then I spend them. So it's a problem. Okay. Let's see. Little Redhead said, before played early in Lotro's history, but we picked it up around 3 years ago. Absolutely. I had been playing some World of Warcraft, and I liked the idea of Lord of the Rings, but at the time, Lord of the Rings was more group-focused or group-demanding than it is now. There's a lot of stuff you can do in Lord of the Rings Online solo if you want to. And in the early days, it was a little bit more focused on, you really should get a fellowship together, which, on brand, to be sure. But I was playing solo, and so I found some of the content more challenging to get through. Especially, I remember, I want to say in the Troll Shaws, the caves, before, possibly even before we had the little, you get a buff because you're doing this alone. It was like, well, you have to go in here, and you better find 3 people who are going to help you, or else you're just going to get smashed by that troll and the 17 trolls beyond. So, yeah, it didn't quite stick then, but especially now I have someone who wants to play with me, and I have a group of friends online who also want to play, and so it's great. Okay, I am caught up on chat. So, what are we doing here? So I frequently play a minstrel, and something I noticed over on the Treebeard server, where we have hit the level 50 cap that will be there until January, and we've been doing things like Heligrod and the Rift, and I was realizing that I don't have a good sense for Soliloquy of Spirit of how many of these buffs are on a player. So Soliloquy of Spirit says that it will stack up to 3 times, and if you have traded into it in your trait panel, at the very bottom, there's an inner strength buff, which means each Soliloquy of Spirit will give you a 1% physical and tactical mitigation up to 3%, which is great. And so that was a thing I was like, oh man, I should probably make sure that's on everyone, or at least the tank and myself, right? Maybe I don't have time for it to go on everyone, but certainly I want to keep better track of this. And the problem is, if you look at my icons up here in the upper left, I can count, okay, I've got 3 Soliloquy of Spirits, cool, and I have inner strength, but by looking at it, you can't tell what tier it is. And inner strength times out after 30 seconds, and the Soliloquy of Spirits time out after 45 seconds. So what we're going to reproduce here is sort of the quintessential problem I was having with inner strength specifically, and Soliloquy of Spirit in general. So inner strength is going to time out here. Oh no, it's gone. Okay, so we can see I have 1, 2, 3 Soliloquy of Spirits and an inner strength, but it's only at tier 1. I'm only getting 1% physical and tactical mitigation because there's just that mismatch of timeouts. And so what I wanted to do was have a plugin that kept track of that information for me. So where we were last week, if we come up here to the plugin manager, and we're going to come to Minstrel Buff and load that up. And we'll just go ahead and move some windows around. So the Minstrel Buff window, I like putting it here above my skills. Soliloquy window, we're just going to put it smack dab in the middle of the screen here. Awesome. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and turn off movement. We're going to get rid of those things. And now, when I do a Soliloquy of Spirit, a row pops up saying Affodil has a Soliloquy of Spirit. And tier 1, that's hard to see with that background, isn't it? All right, we're going to move it back down. So if I go ahead and do another, we can see I've got 2, and I'm at tier 2 of the inner strength, and that's what's happening with these little dots above. We're just custom drawing that as part of the plugin. And if I go ahead and pop a third one, we can see the inner strength timer has reset to 30 seconds. We're now at tier 3, but that first Soliloquy of Spirit is getting close to timing out here, right? It's only got a few seconds left. That's okay. It doesn't hurt for it to time out, except our plugin doesn't know what to do with that yet. So that's where we need to get started today, is now recognize the timer has expired and do something about that. Neat. Now, if you put more Soliloquy of Spirits on here, it'll shove things left. That part's working great. It's just, what do we do with it once it's timed out? Okay. So hopefully that catches you up if you haven't been here before, or if you just forgot where we were last time. Now, I do have a to-do file where I'm kind of tracking things that I want to remember to do. And I've cleaned it up a little bit since last time. There was a lot of clutter in there. But a thing that I mentioned was I want this row to disappear for anyone. And when I say that, the goal is to give me a row for anyone I do this on. So, oh, hey, Gail, you're standing right below me. So we see Gale down there. I've gone ahead and done two Soliloquy of Spirits and an Inner Strength on Gale. I only did one on Maple. And my goal is that I want these rows to disappear automatically when two conditions happen. Their timers have completely expired and we're out of combat. But to test that functionality, I'm going to need to be able to get in and out of combat all the time. Now I was thinking, oh cool, maybe this will be a good time to catch up on my deeds in Avendim. I still have so many Kurgrim and Limrafen to go hunt down. But just as I get better at making plugins, I want to have better ways to test things without having to go and interact with the world. I mean, Lotro is great, but sometimes I just want to sit in my personal house and write a plugin. So what I'd like to do is add buttons to the plugin options, and every plugin can have an options screen here in the plugin manager. And what I want to do is add a section. We already have a debug button called Clear Ballads. I want to add more buttons that say Enter Combat, Leave Combat, that trick the plugin into thinking these things have happened. Now, it won't actually be entering or leaving combat. You know, we're not going to get the glowy thing with the sword down here next to your skill bar. But as far as the plugin's concerned, we will be in combat, and that'll let us just in, out, in, out, in, out. Okay, so you know, this is actually a really good spot for testing this because there's so many people talking to the vendors down there by the stage, and they're all within range of my 25-meter Soliloquy of Spirit. That's awesome. Okay, well, you know, I was sitting there the other day. I was doing some Dutch language homework, and just every 30 seconds hitting my consume consumable for whatever needed a target. And, you know, standing by the stage, there's usually someone there. And if you don't know, you can select nearby players with the F9 key. Nearby NPCs with the F10, and players with the F9. Or at least you can set up your key bindings that way. I don't remember if those are default values or not. But I've got it set up, so F10, nearby NPC, F9, nearby player. So it's really easy for me to hit escape, F9, and then hit my consume consumable, and then as long as someone's standing nearby talking to a vendor, even if the previous person ran off, it just, you know, I can do that without even looking up from my homework. It's pretty easy. Okay, so step one, create entering combat and exiting combat debug buttons. Okay, that's not actually too bad. As we've seen in the past, a lot of plugins, this one included, will have some sort of option window file that controls everything that goes into this option window. Oh, I hit escape and the plugin manager went away. So everything that's being drawn underneath options is in a turbine.ui.control that we pass to the plugin manager and say, this is the thing to show when someone goes to this part. And we can see, actually in main, option window, in main, we cool. In the constructor for our main buff, minstrel buff main class, there's a call to the special variable plugin that exists when your plugin is loading or unloading. And the get options panel, if you assign it to a function, then that function is called when the plugin manager wants to know what to put here. And then you can just go ahead and return whatever, but ultimately you're returning a turbine.ui.control. So get option control, self.option, well, they call it a window. All right, I guess windows work too. That's cool. That has the benefit that you could display that separately somewhere else. I wonder if they do that. All right, let's find out. If I right click, oh no, I've fallen off. All right, well, I'm on the stage. Okay, so short answer, no. Right-clicking on the minstrel buff window does not work. Oh, they have mouse events turned off, so I actually right-clicked on the stage and tried to use it. Excellent. That explains why I ran. Cool. So But if you have your control, you can also have a button that just pops up in your own window. You don't have to host it within the plugin control here, because everything in there is just something that you say, please put in that window. You can host it somewhere else. Many plugins will do some combination of the two, where you can see it here, but you can also see it in another window if you hit the right button. And I think that's good, especially if your options start getting pretty big. You can't control how big the plugin manager window is. You can just say, put this thing there. But on your window, you can size it appropriately. Even if it's going to take up most of the screen, you can size it appropriately, and then it's a little bit more of a natural way to interact with your options. Okay, so in this options, that reminds me. We want to go ahead and make sure we have our source control ready to go. I have launched it here in the background. Which monitor is it going to pop up on? Which murderer? Captioner, what are you trying to get me to say? Sorry, I glanced at the captioner that's running, and it is not always correct. Okay, so we can see we have some things that are not committed to source control. And usually those are things like debug stuff that's just there for our purposes, but we don't necessarily want to ship that out to a general public. And I did want to mention something that I completely forgot about last stream, is that when you are in dissonant stance, the names of your targeted heals as minstrel all get renamed. So instead of raise the spirit, it's raise my spirit. Instead of bolster courage, it's bolster my courage. And instead of improved chord of salvation, it's improved chord of my salvation. And of course, soliloquy of my spirit. And I completely forgot that that was a thing. And so I was hopping on before stream here today and was like, okay, I'm just going to make sure this thing's still working, and nothing was working because when I logged on, I was in dissonant stance. And so that is a change that I made from last time is, let's see, can we do a side-by-side? Yeah, okay. I'm not sure I have enough room for that. So what I did is I went ahead and added another thing that we can see in chat, because whenever you're doing pattern matching, it's great to just have samples to be like, this is what we're looking for. So apply to benefit of soliloquy of my spirit. And I went ahead and changed to absorb that extra my space if it is present. And if it's not there, don't worry about it. And so that pattern got changed. And so I want to go ahead and commit that. Account for dissonance stance names. Well, name. Okay, just going to go ahead and commit this. Excellent. And back to the option window. So we can see we have a debug thing already. In fact, it occurs to me it wouldn't hurt to have like a label that says debug options. So let's start with that. So add debug options label to options screen. And again, that will only show up if we have this show debug options equals true. If I set it to false and go ahead and unload and reload this plugin, we can see that use soliloquy tracker is there, but that button is no longer there. And that's what we're doing with that. We're controlling whether these things are being shown. So unload, reload, and now clear buttons is there. Okay, cool. So we can come on down and show debug options. The first thing we want to do is we want to add a label. So self.debug section label equals a turbine.ui.something. Now, when in doubt, when we can't remember the names of things, we can always consult the API documentation for the Lotro Lua interface. And in this case, we're looking for, yes, of course, a turbine.ui.label. Awesome. .label. Neat. Now, we can see some sample code here. That's very handy. Not all of the API has sample code. I'd love to flesh that out as part of a side project in my spare time, but unfortunately I don't actually have any spare time, so it never happens. But as always, the first thing we want to do with that is go ahead and parent it, set parent, because without a top level window in its hierarchy, we will never see that thing. But we do have something called parent here. That sounds good. Oh, parent is passed in. Great. So that's a parent. and then self.debug section label, and we can see set text is a thing we can do. And we'll probably want to set size as well. So set size, and we're not done here. We still need to put something there. Set size, and we want to go ahead and set position with something. And we can see my text editor thinks that's a syntax error. It is correct, but it's a nice highlighting to be like, yeah, let's go back and do this. Okay, so the first thing, we know what the text is. We're putting debug options in here. Excellent. We also, as far as size goes, we might not need to set that. We probably do. Default labels are probably not the right size, but let's take a look at it in the window first before we mess with the size. But as far as position goes, we should probably do something about that. Now, everything in the window is indented over by 20 pixels, and that's a fine convention. So we know we want 20 pixels from the left and some number of pixels down. Now we're using the Y variable to track how far down the window we're going. So, whoops, we can do Y, and we just have to remember to say Y equals Y plus however much further we want the next thing to go. Let's just start with 30 and see how that looks. Okay. So we added a label, so we want to go ahead and unload and reload the plugin. Oh, okay. So we can see that two things have happened. First, the area in here is not big enough, so we want to make that taller. And also, that label was not wide enough. Let's go ahead and do set the size, or at least let's set the width. Let's set the width to, why not, 200 pixels wide. And then let's think about place controls. Where is this? Okay, we can see the size is set to 400, and that doesn't seem to be enough space for us. We're just going to bump that up to 500, see how that feels. Okay, so we have debug options, and we have clear bells. The only other thing is debug options is not very noticeable. So let's look at the API documentation. We can see there's a set text alignment. Is there anything else that's useful? There's a set font somewhere. Aha, set font. So let's go ahead and set font. So we can say self.debug section label, set font, and then what do we put in here? Well, we're going to put a font. Excellent. But if we notice somewhere in here is the font namespace, and these are things that we can reference by name. We don't have to worry about passing a number. So this is going to be a turbine.ui.lotro.font.something. Now I don't actually know what the default font is, but I do know I wanted something bigger. So let's look at book Antiqua 24. Antiqua. And let's see if we typed that all correctly. Unload, reload, no syntax errors. That doesn't look particularly bigger. All right, let's try Trajan Pro 28. Now, am I using this correctly? It's possible I'm not. So if this doesn't work, I'm going to go look at a working version and see. No, it still doesn't look like it's changing things. Let's go see a working version. Now, I happen to know that one of my plugins, the D Tracker, does this successfully in some fashion. So I'm just going to go look and see how it does it. Font, set font. Oh, okay. Well, I'm guessing that, let's see, globals. There we go. Turbine to you had a look at the font. All right, let's try that. Also, where are we? Yeah, let's paste that in and see if that works okay. And maybe I'm forgetting something. I must be missing something. Maybe the label's just not big enough. Huh. Well, that is confusing to me. Let's see. Set font. Set font. And what am I doing over set font? Sure, we can do set font style. Why not? You know, I haven't actually played around with fonts very much, so as we can see, it may be something that will temporarily confuse me until I figure out what I'm doing wrong. That's just strange to me. Font. Set font, set font. I don't see why this is not working, but I'm not too worried about it. I don't want to get hung up on it. At some point, I want to come back and say, what's going on here? But in the meantime, the only other thing might be that we haven't included the turbine.ui.lotro. So let's go ahead. Oh, there it is right there, turbine.ui.lotro. Okay, well, it's definitely there then. Oops. I don't suppose I'm using it anywhere else. What about Verdana 18? Last try. Okay, well, I'm not going to get hung up on it. That's strange. I would love it to be bigger. We'll deal with that later. In the meantime, we're going to go ahead and add our new buttons. We want a self.debug intercombat button equals something, and a self.debug leave combat button equals something. I feel like it should be exit, enter and exit. Okay, so what is this? Well, we can see an example of what we do with a button right above here. So let's walk through the exercise here. We have a turbine dot, let's see. We have a turbine.ui.lotro.button. Excellent. And we can say self.debug. Oh, that's cool. Okay, so we have a self dot that button. We want to make sure we set the parent. So set parent, and we just have that parent variable that's floating around. It's very convenient. We want to go ahead and remember to self.debug set position. And we're going to do the same thing. It's going to indent over from the left by 20 pixels and use that Y variable. We do want to make sure we remember to increment that Y variable, otherwise things are going to get stacked on top of each other. It's not going to be broken from the plugin's perspective, but it'll make it hard for us to click one of the buttons over the other. All right, self.debug button, we want to set the size. The clear ballads button, that's a fine size, so we can say it's 150 pixels wide, 20 pixels tall. Excellent. We want to go ahead and debug enter combat, debug exit combat. We want to say set text. And we're going to go ahead and just put a placeholder here for now, since I'm doing a multi-edit, but we'll come back and fix that up. And then finally, self.debug click. And that's called when you click the button. That's going to be equal to the anonymous function, taking two parameters, the center and the arguments. And we'll go ahead and just do a shell.writeLine. Just to prove to ourselves that these buttons are hooked up correctly, we're going to output that information to the text, to the standard output. Okay, and now we're going to just go ahead and end our multi-edit. We're going to come back here, set text, enter combat. Excellent, and exit combat. Cool. So if we unload, load, oh no, we forgot the Y variable. Of course, I meant to come back and clean that up. So Y equals Y plus 30. We want to go ahead and add that after each one of these UI elements. That way, should we come back and add something more, it's taken into account. Okay, so we can see we have clear ballads, enter combat. Whoa. Apparently, I edited the wrong thing. There we go. Okay, so we can see clear battles, enter combat, exit combat. Now, how are we going to see that? Well, I haven't actually made a new chat window that we can see. So you can right click and say create new tab and then pull that off, drag it anywhere. I'm going to go ahead and rename this for plugins. And I'm going to go ahead and change the filters to include error and standard. Those are the two places your plugin can write information to. Standard, you can write whatever you want to. Error will spit out error messages if your plugin has done something wrong. Okay, so we can say enter combat. Excellent. We get the enter combat text and exit combat. Perfect. Those buttons exist and are hooked up so they have an event handler. Now we're going to do something a little bit more meaningful than this, but we are ready to be able to jump in. So a thing I would like to muse about here is, where do we think about combat? In my mind's eye. No, that's not what I was looking for. So there is a way to know when the player has entered combat. If I go into the main file here and search for combat, aha, self in combat changed is a function that we are using for local player in combat changed. Great. What that means is if we call in combat changed on the main class, it will act as if it has received an in combat change from the local player, which passes off to refresh visibility. Now that's something. I think what's going to happen is this needs to change. This needs to change because refresh visibility is correct for the main plugin, but it's over-specified. Yes, we want to refresh the visibility of the main plugin, but we also want our little tiny section of plugin to know this has happened. So what we're going to do is we could do it inline here by just adding more to this anonymous function, or we can create our own function. Let's see. Function min strip off main handle combat changed. And we'll even take the sender and the arg. So we can see refresh visibility does not care about that, but I do. Actually, now that I think about it, refresh visibility, that just calls set visibility on the buff window. Set visibility. Visibility. There we go. There we go. Let's see. Okay, so it's just rechecking the is in combat flag. That's totally fine, but that means that even if we were trying to spoof this out, we would have trouble with that, because the whole point of this is we want to be able to override the actual state of things. So we want the soliloquy tracker to be receiving a thing that says yes or no, and just believe it. So we want to go ahead and call self-refresh visibility, but let's see, we want to say local is in combat equals something. And I don't know what to expect by default. What are we expecting? So we have a helper function called dump that we can just use to inspect things. Let's go ahead and dump args. Oh, I'm going to need to enter combat. That's okay. We're near some stuff. So we're going to go ahead and dump args. We'll even say turbine.shell.writeline args and concatenate in the dump of that. And the sender itself is almost certainly going to be like the local player or something, but just out of curiosity, let's see what we get there also. And one final line just to remind ourselves where this is coming from. Handle combat changed. Great. So if we go ahead and say self handle combat changed, sender args, passing on those that we received, then we're still going to get that refresh visibility. Everything else should work, but we'll also get some extra text. Okay, let's load that in and see if anything went wrong. Doesn't look like it did. And we are in Frostbluff. There's all sorts of dangerous winter creatures here. Let's head on down to the lake. It's not that dangerous. Being level 50, even with deadly landscape difficulty, these level 10 creatures will pose no threat. Okay, some wintry weather. I almost wish they were the snowman thing. I know it's kind of like a cool little thing for the Frostbluff instance, but it'd be cool if they were here too. Okay, so unfortunately, I'm level 50, so the only way I can get into combat and stay is if I just hit them with my frying pan. So let's take a look at what we have. We have the sender was in combat changed. Okay, so a function. And args, there are no args coming in. That's actually not too bad because we can deal with this. So I'm going to dispatch this wintry weather. That's about the most combat you're going to see on this channel most of the time, just testing these plugins. Let's go ahead and go back into the code. And so in combat changed, if we do local is in combat, we can go ahead and get that information. So we have local player, we have that variable, and we can do the same thing that buff does of is in combat. And if we couldn't remember what that was, we can always go back to the API documentation and come on into turbine.gameplay.localPlayer and say, hey, what do we have about combat? Oh, is in combat, excellent. And that's where the in combat changed callback function or event is as well. So is in combat gets a flag, great. So if we're being called by the game, we can go ahead and pass is in combat. All right, so we're gonna change this is in combat. And otherwise, if we call this function ourselves, we can pass whatever we want to pass. We can lie. Okay, let's try this again. You there, wintry weather, disperse. Okay, we can see is in combat is true. And after I disperse this, we'll get an is in combat false. So the game is telling us the true state of combat. Great. Okay. And then the only thing we need now is the option window. Does it have a way to talk about the main window? Well, I sure hope so. Okay, we have the settings. We have MB main, excellent. So if we come on in here, whoops, we can say MB main, and we're gonna go ahead and, oh no, where did it go? Combat. Excellent. Handle combat changed. That's what I called it. Excellent. So handle combat changed, and we're gonna say true. We are entering combat. And same thing down there. We're gonna go ahead and handle combat changed. False. We are no longer in combat. And in fact, if we wanted to be a little bit clearer about what we're doing, we can say local is in combat equals true, and then just pass that, is in combat. Never be afraid to give something a name, especially if it's a Boolean or if it's a number. These numbers 30 here, I'm getting away with it because it's debug code, or I'm letting myself get away with it because it's debug code. But it might be nice to just define a thing that says debug exit combat button height or margin or something. This is really button height plus button margin, and we just know that 30 is probably good enough for our purposes. So don't be afraid to give things names. It's fine. Though in this case, we want that to be false. Okay, so if we unload and reload to pick up those changes, then what do we see? If we see enter combat, aha, is in combat true, exit is in combat false. Excellent. That allows us to fake out our section of the plugin, the soliloquy section. Now remember, we saw this window just goes directly to the source and says, let me check. And that's fine, but it does make it harder to do tests like these. So I'm not going to go reinventing the rest of the plugin. That's someone else's baby. And maybe that's a later task to bring it up to be able to do this. When I was testing some stuff, when I was adding some features, I spent a lot of time in Dunlin just destroying the boar population, which was both good for my leather and task items, and it was fine. But I wished in retrospect that I had this. Let's just enter and exit to test the logic of the plugin separate from what the game thinks should happen. So here we are. Finally got it done. Okay, so let's go ahead and slip on back to the to-do. We have added debug options label. Excellent. Create entering combat and exit combat debug buttons. Great. So the final thing is we need to hook up these buttons to the Soliloquy tracker window. Now we have that window reference here somewhere. Soliloquy, there we go, self Soliloquy window. So if we go ahead and self Soliloquy window something, that'll let us tell the Soliloquy window what the current state of combat is. So let's come on in and let's have let's see, self.isInCombat equals false. We can assume that that's false and that the game will override that if we get into combat right after the plugin loads or whatnot. But that's a good starting point. And then we want to go ahead and have function Soliloquy tracker window. I don't know, naming things is hard. Handle combat changed. There we go. And then, well, we'll take the whole thing. Handle combat changed is in combat. And then we can just say self is in combat equals is in combat. And we just save that off. Now, the reason, this is why the original plugin didn't do this, right? It could just query, it didn't have to save this information. But if you want to fake out the plugin in a debug sense, then you need to just save this off and trust that it's correct. And so from now on, when we're wondering, are we in combat, we'll just check this variable. If the game sends us in and out of combat, it'll update correctly. If the debug buttons are pressed, we'll be in whatever state we want to be. Perfect. All right, so make the initial window, well, we're done with the debug stuff. Excellent. So going back to our source control, we can take a look. Now, there's a lot of good stuff in here for testing purposes, and there's nothing particularly a problem with shipping this code out as long as it's turned off by default. So I want to consider committing this, but let's check what else has changed. Okay. So looks like I forgot to actually call the handle combat changed function in main. Let's go ahead and do that. Otherwise, Lotro will not like those question marks. Handle combat changed is in combat. Great. And we could see if we wanted to come back later and pass off the is in combat flag, we could do that right here. Refresh visibility could take that, pass it onto the buff window, and we could adapt buff window to use this same faking out system. Okay, let's go ahead and unload and reload. Make sure I didn't miss anything else. I did miss something else. Awesome. We can see Soliloquy tracker window, line 49. Let's take a look at that. I did not use I used a colon instead of a dot. That's wrong. Colons for calling functions with an implicit self-parameter. That was very foolish of me. There we go. Okay, and in combat, out of combat, nothing seems to be a problem. Okay, so let's go ahead and maybe commit some of these changes here. Just curious. Okay, so we have the handle combat changed. We have updated the in combat change handler to figure out if we're in combat and pass that on. And again, we don't have to save that into a variable. We could just pass local player is in combat, but I don't mind splitting it out into two. Otherwise, it would be a very long line. So this, we're going to go ahead and stage that. And then the rest of this is something else. Oh, thanks, Moobot and Little Redhead. Those are some awesome plugins. We're going to go ahead and, stage that change. We're going to go ahead and stage, oh, nope. If I'm going to commit something to the repository, I want it to be in the good to ship state. So we're going to say, show debug options equals false. So by default, if I ship it like this and all that stuff is still in there, nothing is down here. Now, a thing actually that shows me is I forgot to change the size based on the debug state or not. Whoops. So we might want to go ahead and knock that down. Let's say to 300. Let's check that out. Let's see. 200? Surely not. Why is it so tall? Am I changing the wrong thing? I might be. There it is. There it is. Okay. Now we can see it's not quite tall enough now. Maybe 350. Yeah. All right. We'll call it 400. Final offer. Okay, so if it's 400 here, and that's good, and we want it to be 500 if we're in debug mode, and that if debug mode is on, excellent. Okay, so local height equals 400 if show debug options, then we can say height equals 500. We can just do a quick little thing and then height. Okay, so in that case, debug options is on. We have this space down here. We can go ahead and say false. And like that, the options window has shrunk down a little bit. So if someone comes in here, they're going to see a little bit of extra space at the top and the bottom, but not just a large gap of lack of stuff. Now, other thing we could do is keep track of all the things we've added and not have to guess. And then just set the size of the window to be the size of all the stuff in the window. But that's a little bit more revamping than we want to get into today. All right, so let's take a look at what that would look like. In the options window, we have a show debug options equals false. Great. We have variable height depending on whether or not we're going to include the debug stuff. Great. And then finally, we're going to go ahead and commit the debug stuff, ship it out the door. No one will see it unless they're looking for it. And if they see it, that's fine. There's nothing in here that's particularly weird. Now, the debug ignore valid effects, that is a change in main. So we're going to come back to, we're going to go ahead and commit that and come back to main and include the debug ignore effects here and using it in the refresh effect display. And that was another testing meant to simulate what happens when ballads go away, trying to make sure that this combat timer reacts appropriately. Okay, so we're going to add a commit, committing debug options with, and What was that one thing? Ignore, including ignore LED effects. Okay, so that's a good note to ourselves if we're wondering, what on earth is this? Ignore LED effects, enter, exit, combat. Okay. Now, we, clever people that we are, know that we really want that to be true as we go along here. And we can see the only difference in the options file now, the only unsnapshotted piece of information is setting that flag to true. That's lovely. That means everything else is captured, and we can see we're back, we have our buttons. Perfect. Okay. Oh, goodness. I meant to commit this too. Okay. Okay. Soliloquy window knows about combat now. Yes. Excellent. That should have gone into something, probably. But that's okay. Sometimes your commits get a little out of order. But better that than not having any at all. Okay, so we have some snapshots of the stuff we've done so far. So now we can keep making changes and see what happens. And we can revert easily to a safer working configuration. Okay, apparently other people are here doing combat-y stuff. I'm going to run across to the banker hideout. I hear that's a safe place to be. Hello, Guard Frostway. Get it? Frost? Because it's cold here. I actually kind of wonder about some of the names in town and what they're like in German and French. Like, did they keep that theme of silly names? Also, I'm very curious. Can I hop on this roof? Oh yeah. Okay, so we're back in our natural state on a chimney, and we're ready to go. So let's take a look. What do we have on our to-do list? Oh yes, a little housekeeping. Make the initial window size more like the initial needed size. So a thing that you may have noticed from before is when we go to move the soliloquy window, it's huge. And if we go ahead and populate the soliloquy window, the amount of space we need is tiny. So I would like the window size to be a little bit more conforming to the row size. So that should be pretty easy now that we have kind of settled on what the row looks like. So the soliloquy tracker window could have a minimum size of something, but I'm not convinced it needs a minimum size. Instead, whenever we add a row, add player, we want to go ahead and say self dot window set size, and we know we want to add the height of whatever we just put in. And if the width is not big enough, we want to make it that wide also. So local row width, row height equals row get size. Now in Lua, unlike some other languages, a function can return multiple values. So if we come to turbine.ui.control and we look at the get size function, we can see it returns a tuple, a number and another number. And if we want to capture both of them, we just use the same syntax. Row width, row height. If you only include one of them, that's not a problem. You will only get one of the values, the first one, and then the second one just gets thrown away. And so that's fine, although in that case you might as well just call get width or get height if you only want one of them. But I do want both of them. So we want to go ahead and if row height is greater than self.window get, if row width is greater than self.window.getWidth, then we want to go ahead and self.window set width. What on earth? That was a weird autocomplete. row width. So we're going to go ahead and make ourselves wider if we need to be wider. And that allows us to set our initial size to basically 0. I don't know if it's actually an error to be an initial size of 0, 0. We might need to be at least 1 pixel in each direction. We'll check on that. But we do know that we want to go ahead and add the height of the row we just added to the height of the window. So self.window set height to something. We know that we have the height of the row, but we need local window height equals self.window get height. Great. And now we can go ahead and say window height plus row height. And that'll give us just enough vertical space to fit the thing that we just put in, and we'll make sure this thing is as wide as it needs to be. Now, in the future, we might want to get complicated enough to say, oh, a maximum number of things vertically, and then start on a second column or a third column, similar to a mini raid or something else where you have a whole grid of players. But I'm thinking right now I'm not going to worry about that too much. If we get too many targets and it just spills off the screen, then I'll just deal with that for right now. It'll be fine. I'll see it in situ, and that'll give me some ideas of how I want to improve it. Okay, so we can see that adding a player makes sure we're as wide as we need and taller. And when we eventually have a removed player, it can go ahead and shrink us back down. But in the meantime, let's go ahead and unload. Let's load. And if I see, well, I don't see our window at all, which actually kind of makes sense. Okay, that is less making sense. Okay, let's assume that we need to have a size of at least 1 and try that out. Where's my window? Uh-oh. Well, this is why we take a snapshot before we start doing strange things. Okay, I'm going to revert a second and just set the size to 300, 300 and see, is that the problem? Okay, that's where my window should be. So what's going on here? Can I do 100, 100? Is that going to be weird? Okay, there's Soliloquy. Nice. And if I do this, is the size of the row not getting reported correctly? Oh, that's fascinating. I didn't even think about that. Let's go take a look at this. So we get a row, we get the size. Let's go ahead and write that out. Turbine.shell.writeLine. And we'll say width, height, and we'll go ahead and say row width, and then row height. Great. Let's take a look at this. We see a width of 142. We see a height of 75. Those seem plausible. Let's go ahead and write out our information. Window width, window height equals self, window get size. I want to see that too while we're at it. I am suspicious. Okay, so row width height, window width height, and we're going to plop in the window width, plop in the window height. Let's take a look. What's going on here? Have I misunderstood something? Okay, we can see the window width height. Okay, so we can see the row width should be bigger than this. In fact, we can substitute in this now. And then set width, row width. Okay. Oh, of course. I was just thinking earlier that, and in fact, I think I even wrote it here, if we need to change the window and the list box at the same time. Otherwise, we're not going to be seeing all the contents. Of course. So what we need is function what do I want to call this? Update size, and then is added, and then row width, and then row height. Maybe I want something like this. And then we can add or remove stuff all in one location, and then we can keep track of the window and the list box all together. This seems better. Let's start with this. And we're going to go ahead and all of this we're going to change to self update size and is added is true. And again, we could have a local is added equals true and then pass that on, just so we don't just have a true sitting there. And then we can go ahead and do row get size for the width and the height. Okay, so I'm going to move all this stuff up here. Maybe it'll be useful, maybe not, but that's okay. And then so change window and list box sizes. Okay, we can see the list box starts out in sync with the parent size. So we're going to go ahead and we have the row width, we have the row height. Let's go ahead and grab that window width and height. That makes sense. We still want to go ahead and if the row width, we can go ahead and say if is added and row width is greater than window width, then we'll go ahead and do that. And self.listBox set width, row width. Great. Same thing. We already have the row width and the row height. Don't need that anymore. So we're going to go ahead and say local delta equals row height. If is added, if not is added. Can you do a unary not? We'll see. Then delta equals minus row height. End. And then we're going to go ahead and window set height to window height plus delta. And same thing, but with the list box. Let's give that a try. And then just so we can see what we've done, turbine.shell.writeLine. We're going to say window size. And we're going to say self.window get width by self.window get height. Great. And you know what? I would love to see those values first, and then after this function is run. So pre window size and post window size. Okay. You know, this delta thing seems overly complicated. Maybe we'll just call it new height. I kind of want to just have new height set to something, but if it's not, then set it to something else. The window height plus delta twice here makes me worried, because anytime you do it twice, you run the risk of changing one and then the other. Oh, hey, hello, legend. Do you know if the raid item Unwelcome Mat still drops from Barad Kularin? As far as I know, yes. Not that I've seen it, mind you, but the last time a group of mine was looking to have it drop, the wiki seemed to say so. That being said, I do have some exports, some data dumps. So let's go take a look and see if there's anything obvious in the information. So unwelcome Matt, excellent. We can see level 65, bind to account on acquire, that is something. A collection of robes, deep black, most uninviting. It seems to still be in the system, and I don't see anything in here saying, obsolete or inactive or anything. Ninny says, Hackerman. If that's a description of me, that is very nice. Thank you. I am muddling through as best as I can. Little Redhead answers, yeah. As far as I understand, it's a very rare drop. And other thing that you can do, if you haven't seen it, I'll pull it up here in the background. Benrail says, it would be nice if the JRR Skins UI plugin would go around and cover the extra hotbars. Fascinating. I have played around with skins so little that I understand the words that you're saying, but I don't know the specific problem that you are elucidating. Like, I know Little Redhead uses skins a lot more, so she probably knows exactly what you're talking about. That being said, the UI files, gibberishy though they might seem, are pretty straightforward XML once you start digging into it, is my understanding. So they are things that you can go in and just tweak a number and reload, or log off, log back on, and see what happens and get a sense of, oh, that's what's going on. So don't be afraid to go and try to tweak things yourself and then see what happens, and just keep a backup to revert if things don't go well. Okay, so in the background, I have loaded up the Lotro Companion, and I just went in here and unwelcome, the unwelcome Matt. Tell me more. Can I know more? Yeah, oh, I can know lots more. That'll teach me to not stop. Okay. Barterer. Oh, right, because you need to give them the something or something. Okay, so the black robes. Where did my items go? Downloads. Items. So we're looking for black robes. Of course, I'm just looking at the underlying information that they're using here. Quality rare, Apparently, it'll stack to so many. Or maybe that's the key for not stacking at all. Found in Fanciest Wood Chest, Lieutenant Abdul Gulder. Neat. I was wondering if this list would show percentage chances. And looks like if that information is available, probably is not, then it's not displayed here. Where are the black robes? Black chance? Black robes. Okay, so to my knowledge they're in the game. To my knowledge they're hard to get. But I would very much like an unwelcome Matt when the time comes. Fingers crossed, I'll be able to participate in that level of content on Treebeard when it comes around. Okay, so that's Lotro Companion. I'll let you dig into some of the underlying information. Okay. Okay, Little Redhead says, I think maybe they're talking about all the bars above that bottom one. Yep, I assumed that's what was being talked about. Oh, yes. Okay, thanks. I was wondering if it still dropped because I've done like 20 to 30 runs on T2. No challenge mode, though, but I've not seen it. My guess is you do need to, if you're not seeing it without challenge, my guess is you'll need to run it at max. You and the instance will have to be at cap. That would be a secondary guess because, yeah, if you've done it 20, 30 times, if it's a 1% drop chance, that's not, that takes a lot. So let's just do the quick math. So if it's a 1% drop chance and you've done it 30 times, then there's only a 25% chance, 26% chance that you wouldn't have seen it in one of those drops. that's still a 1 in 4 chance that you wouldn't have seen it at all, right? Like to get that down to a a much lower level. Like if we do, let's say you do 50 runs, right? Anyway, so oh wait, was that only a 25% chance? Yeah, so 30 runs. Sorry, so a 26% chance of seeing it. So three quarters of the time you still wouldn't have seen it. If you run it 50 times, 0.99, 50, now suddenly you have a 40% chance of having seen that drop. Like a 1% drop chance is horribly low, if I'm doing my math right on the fly here. Okay. Cool. Yeah, so that would be my next guess is they're pretty cool, maybe challenge mode. Is map overlay still untouchable with plugins? Yes-ish. So if you press the M button, the thing that comes up, this can be modified with skins to be a different size or shape, but it is the thing that comes up when you press M. That being said, More Maps does provide alternate maps to with different layers that you can play around with. Let's see, if we do a plugins, is it listed? Plugins. It's not. Let's take a look. Okay, so if we come, of course, to the Lotro interface page, if you haven't been here before, this is a place to get plugins. It's the place as far as I'm concerned. And if we just do a search for map, we're going to see More Maps, which was the specific thing I was looking for. There's a lot of stuff here, actually. All right, so More Map. More Map, I have been told, is a plugin that allows you to have maps where you can make markers on it, where you can see different things. So, filterable list of annotations as an example. Let's see, using the map to activate a monster player map. Neat. Wow, that is an old looking screen cap. We can see this. The More Maps has a bunch more stuff on it than the default map, right? I thought there was a way in More Maps where you can make little notations on the map, like I found a cool little hut here with squirrels or whatever. Yeah, here's an annotation where you can add stuff. So it doesn't replace the map in that I think you can't launch it by pressing the M key, but I'm sure it's got an icon here somewhere where you can press it, More Map comes up, and then you can just kind of get in the habit of pressing that instead of pressing M. So, yeah, so SSG historically has been cautious about opening what things you can change about the UI with a plugin, and the map has never been a specific one, other than changing size and shape. So you'll see, like with the JR skins that they were talking about before, I think, at least with some of the skins, you can change it so it doesn't cover the whole screen, which is nice if you like to bring up the map while you're running along and don't want to run off a cliff. Oh, hey, More Map. Not just for the Moors anymore. Yeah, I always found that name a little bit like, well, I don't play PvMP, but it's not just for the Moors. Now it's just M-O-R-E, More Map. Okay. What do we have? Oh, more stuff. Thank you all for throwing questions in chat. I am easily distracted. Okay, which player frame is that? Oh, good question. This is the, that was from Mugnug. This is the Blaze of Hope, which I believe comes from Legendary servers. Let's see, Lotro Blaze of Hope frame. Yeah, you get to level 60 on a Legendary server. Obviously, I did that on a Nor, not on Treebeard. That's not until January. And it is an account-wide unlock. So, which is how I'm able to use it over on Treebeard. Lovely. It's one of my favorites. I do appreciate the tournament ones. So the tournament hero, I really like this one. But it felt like being on a Legendary server that the Blaze of Hope was a little bit more in line with the environment. Okay. Ken says, I'm curious about storage. I have 75 inventory slots. Do you experience players buy 5 slots each for Lotro coins to get it maxed. So I am a sucker for quality of life improvements. And so when it comes to storage, the most bang for your buck, as far as I'm concerned, is shared storage, because it is account-wide, not character only. And so if you have the choice between adding space to your shared storage, which affects not only all your characters on one server, but all servers, or just adding space to your character, I default to shared storage for a long time. And eventually, there were enough sales of shared storage that I finally got it maxed out. And the add space button is still there, but the store doesn't let me buy anymore. It's like, no, we're going to cut you off. And so, yeah, I click the button, shared storage, nothing. It's very sad. So yeah, keep an eye out for it to be on sale, but that's sort of the most bang for your buck, because you can treat it as if it's just storage for your character if you want to, or you can use it to pass stuff around to other characters, and it's just a temporary kind of thing. And yeah, so if you have just like a character that you play and the disposable LPs or income to do it, maxing out your individual storage is lovely. It's nice. But that was a secondary for me compared to getting shared storage up there. Little Redhead says housing rates are 50% off right now, which is a good point. Housing storage isn't very much, but you get more storage with premium housing, and so you could always dump stuff there if you have problems. And of course, carry-alls. I can't recommend them enough. If you, again, have the disposable income or LPs, carry-alls are a big quality of life thing where I can focus more on the immersiveness of the game and less about where am I going to put all this stuff that I've picked up, because yes, it's Lord of the Rings, but also it's an MMO and I've got stuff that I've picked up. And so the carry-alls let me abstract away the hauling it around problem and focus on the storyline that the game is presenting to me. So I really appreciate them, but of course they're a little pricey in the store, although they were just on sale for half off, so I don't know if they still are, but that was incredibly generous. I saved mini LPs, or I spent mini LPs, depending on how you look at it. Let's see, carry-all, show me. They're not on sale anymore. Yeah, the large crafting carry-alls were half off at just under 1,000 LP, which is a big difference. Veneral says, wow, 32k LP. Yes, I have some LP, both from deeding and also from purchasing. Again, it's nice to have them just for these quality of life improvements. If I'm going to spend hours in the game, I'd rather focus on the things I find fun, the story, the questing, the deeding, and less on how am I gonna hold this thing. Yeah, do keep an eye out. They continue to do sales in December, I think, just as part of the end of year seasonal stuff. So each week, I believe they're changing what's on sale. And I wouldn't expect the carry-alls to come back on sale, but they have surprised me in the past. What I would really like are task carry-alls to come for sale at all. But you can keep an eye out at the newsletter, the Beacon. You can keep an eye out for that. And of course, in the various Discord servers, I'm sure people... and Little Redhead says, Cord teased the next 2 weeks sales should be really good, which I'm assuming is targeted specifically at me and means that task carry-alls are going to come on sale. So thanks, Cord. That may not be true. Awesome. Okay, so cool. I'm caught up on chat. Thanks so much for tossing those questions in there. Like I said at the beginning, I am doing a plugin development thing here, but I'm happy to expound on subjects that I know anything about. Like, obviously, I know very little about skins, but those things I know, I'm happy to share or dig into. Okay, thanks, Blaze of Hope. Okay, so let me put our API reference back here and bring our text chat back, or sorry, our text editor back. All right, Ken says, I have the wallet, so I really just want the shared storage and large carry-all, and I'm ready to go. Got my dwarf to level 22 today, so I'm having a blast. That's awesome. Yeah, the carry-all, especially the crafting carry-all for me, was really just a game changer for not worrying about things so much. That being said, inventory is also lovely, and I can't remember, but I believe inventory is also account-wide. So if you add 5 spaces to your inventory, it's all characters. And so anything that's account-wide for me is really important because I have multiple characters on multiple servers. And so if I was only playing the one character, it wouldn't really matter which one I went. Like character storage, inventory, shared storage, it's all the same if you only have one character. But as soon as you get that second character, or are like, ooh, I wonder what's going on Laurelin. I hear there's parties and musical festivals, and then all those account-wide things are really great. Same thing with journeyman writing, which is a bit of a pricey thing if you're only looking at a single character. But as soon as it affects multiple characters, as soon as you get out of that tutorial zone and immediately have the writing skill and amount, and you're like, oh yeah, that's amazing for every one of my characters. So that's cool too. Oh, hello, person. Ah, excellent. Okay, so where were we? We were just finishing this update size. I don't think I had refreshed the plugin, so we want to go ahead and unload and then reload the Minster buffs, and we'll see all sorts of syntax errors. Excellent. All right, Captain Fenhu says, lurky turkey and happy early festivals of the winter. Yes, yes, happy Yule, happy every outside of the game holiday as well. Now you can add Sinterklaas, although that's already passed here in the Netherlands. Okay, so we have an error. We have an unexpected symbol. I'm going to make this window a little bit wider if I can. Excellent. So, Soliloquy Tracker window line 63. Let's go take a look at that. Oh, okay, so it did not like my unary not. So, if not is added, let's see if that works better. Oh, yeah. So, if you're doing a comparison, equals is double equal, and then not equal is tilde equal. Instead of a lot of languages use exclamation point. Not sure why Lua chose differently. And I just foolishly was like, well, surely that'll work. No. Okay, so let's check this out. Okay, we can see the Soliloquy window now. Oh, so the size of the drag bar is not going to update automatically. We should look into that. But in the meantime, I wonder if I can put that on Guard Frostway. No. Okay, I'm gonna head back to where I can find more suckers to put healing on. I'm guessing there's 1 or 2 people running around in Winterhome. So I'm just gonna run up the hill here. Okay, and then in the meantime, if this function is correct, and we can see the pre-window size was 100, the post was 142 by 175. That's very promising. We saw both the width and the height increase to the minimum size that we needed. Excellent. Oh, hey, if you click on the drag bar, oh, that's fun. But why is the height like that? You know what? I miss a chimney. Let's go, let's circle around here. So, in Winterhome, if you did not know, if you're very careful and don't overshoot, you can hop up onto this ledge here. And then you can run across this ledge, up on the roof, and then look down on all the peasants below you. I mean players. Okay, so we had a pre-window and post-window, and oh, of course, because we added the height. We didn't just set the height to whatever. So if we can go ahead and now say, get this back to 1 and 1, do we still see something that works? Yes, okay. And if we come in, oh, Dragbars is not happy about that. Okay, so let's assume that our minimum size is oh, that's width. That's fine. Let's see. Sorry, I was just trying to figure out how we're going to solve this width problem, but it's the width is the problem. I don't think Dragbars cares about the height. Yeah. I mean, obviously it shows that the height is 1 pixel, and that's a little weird. But if we come back in here and we click on Soliloquy, yeah, okay, that's fine. I like that. Okay, and then if we go ahead and put this on someone else, we get another row. We can see that if we click on Soliloquy Tracker, okay, it's not updating the height, but I'm not too worried about that. Oh, when you start dragging, it does. That's not bad. There's might be a function in the drag bar library that we can call to say, refresh this. Benreal says, have you used Debuff Vitals? You know, I have not, although someone was just mentioning it in one of the community discords today. Lotro interface. Let's pull it up and see if it looks familiar at all. Debuff Vitals, but I think the answer is no. Let's see. All right, Debuff Vitals. Looks like it has a lot of options. Oh my goodness. That's what I'm talking about with a custom option screen. Sometimes it just needs to be huge. Sometimes maybe there are better ways to organize your things. I would probably separate out each of these categories just on the face of it. That's intimidating. Okay, let's take a look. We have... So that looks like a target. And so is it showing the stuff on your target or... So we have morale, we have power, and it looks like effects with cooldowns. So maybe it knows about specific targets ahead of time? Or do those stick around? Oh, okay, those are just general things. Days, stuns, rooted, and then if something qualifies. Okay, interesting. And then it says, I'm thinking of getting a buff and debuff tracker. Exo says, collapsible fields. Are you saying these are collapsible or should be? Target tracker dots tracker. The dots you put up, I imagine, says Benro. Okay. Yeah, I could see that. That is neat. No, I have not used Debuff Vitals. You know, that's a good point, Exogenesis. I really appreciate the tree view list view thing that you've got going with oh, nuts. I'm forgetting it already. Shout out the name of your plugin. Auras. No. Auras. Yeah, so you don't have your... Oh, I think you should have your options on there. It looks cool. Okay, so yes, auras. So if you use Lotro Plugin Companion, you can do a search, add new plugins, add that. It goes ahead and automatically downloads and installs, and then you can just hit the green arrow, and then let's load that sucker. Uh-oh. Attempt to index field class null. But I've got the Lotro stuff. Oh, because it's not on a mini. Oh, well. Okay. Then I can't show it off, but I wanted to show it off. Anyhow, yes, the collapsible sections in your options. Last time I looked, which I admit was over a month ago, I really appreciated the cleanness of it when compared to just spit everything out into one thing. Like with the D-Tracker plugin, which has enough options that it's needing to be a little bit better. Like it's just this long list of things you can do, and it could use some organization. And here's things that show and hide deeds. Here's other things, and so I do want to take inspiration on that and have, if not collapsible sections, then at least sections, right? Like maybe tabs, maybe something. Anyhow, all that being said, that is a very large configuration window. No, so I have not used Debuff Vitals. It looks very interesting. Is the short answer. Okay, so we have a window that's a reasonable starting size. Now, this 142, this worries me a little bit because we should be able to do something about the width. Control width. The control width is always the same. And I feel like we should be able to do something about that. Okay, that's a problem for later, but this would be useful to hoist out either as global variables or as a function that you could call to say what is the width of this thing, because it's going to be the same for each run through until that icon size changes really, or I want more or less margins. Chromite has chimed in, thanks so much. Debuff vitals is nice, but it can cause performance issues. That makes me wonder if it's using chat logging instead of the target effects list, which, as we have seen, the effects list of non-player things seems a little inconsistent sometimes. And scanning chat, especially combat chat, and doing pattern matching on every entry definitely would slow things down. It says, though, then I won't get debuff vitals. What I would say is that everyone's experience is going to be slightly different based on your setup. If you've got a nice new fast computer, you're going to notice that extra processing that a plugin has to do a lot less than someone who's running on 5 or 10-year-old equipment. Target effects is the performance loss, says Exo. Okay. Oh, cool. Exo, yes. Thank you for chiming in on what class they are playing. Okay, so we have a default size. Note, get width from row someday. And then we have the ability to make the thing bigger or smaller. Now, everything's looking good there, so I'm going to get rid of this debug output. And we wanted to remember to change window and list box sizes. Awesome. That is all working. And we have a central update size function that we can just call once we're removing rows that should shrink it back up. So that's excellent. So we can come on in and say grow the window when adding a row. Okay, so we can go ahead and take a snapshot of where we are right now. So commit initial window size is better. Options window, nope, we don't need that. And then that initial size and the update size, all of that we want to take. Okay, so we have a commit message, we have the stuff we're taking a snapshot of, bam. Now we just see the things that have changed since then. Oh, and there's our kind of a mock-up of what we want this to look like. And so we can revisit that someday. All right. Give timer a function to call when it expires. So what's the sort of the problem is we have, I guess I should unload and reload. Okay, so we have these things that come in, but they never go away. And so we want the row to know when a timer has expired, but we don't want the row to be checking all the time. Are you done? Are you done? Are you done? Are we done? We just want the timer to say, I am done. And so what we need is the way to pass a timer, a function to say, please call this when you are done, when you have timed out. Okay, some chat going on. Guardian main and loving my runekeeper. Nice. Cool. Exo says, perhaps try skill timers for Arcade Guard. Nice. Is that the name of a plugin? Lotro interface. Let's come on over and skill timers. Skill timer. Well, it was last changed recently, so perhaps that's the one you're talking about. Let me know. I'll drop a link into chat. Okay. And then that's the one. Okay. Skill timer plugin. There we go. I've never seen that one, but that looks cool. Oh yes, I did see Gibberish recently. That looked really like it had a lot of features as well. So we have in the Minstrel Buff plugin, we have something called timer control. This is the thing that is causing the white bar to shrink. And the way it does is is it says, yes, please give me an update every frame. It checks how much duration has passed, and it makes the bar proportional to that elapsed time. And so it is a concern in my head because it's getting called every frame to say, do you want to do something? Do you want to do something? Do you want to do something? And part of me wants to have a central tick function that does get updates, but then every time a second passes, it just lets controls that care, okay, it's been a second. Okay, it's been a second. So it's only doing it, once a second for each of these controls instead of 30 times a second, and they're all doing kind of their independent checks. But again, that's a bigger rewrite of the plugin. But that's a thought in my head is, okay, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, now 5, 6, 7, 8 controls that are all doing this pretty much exact same thing. Has it been a second? Has it been a second? But the reality is they could take down fast. Yeah, anyway, there's a whole thing and a bunch of reasons why I'm not going in. But it's a thought that's in my head. It's like, maybe I could do this. Okay, but we have a control. We have set width, we have set timer size, set start time, set duration, get duration, set right to left, get remaining percent, refresh display behavior, update, pause, resume. But what we don't have is a callback. Do this when we're done. In fact, where do we know that we are done? If width is, hide a full left to right bar. Width equals that minus width. Okay, where do we call that? Remaining percent. If the remaining percent is less than 0. Great. Here's where we want to do something. Call the callback function if it exists. If something is not equal to nil, then something. All right, that's kind of what we want. Oh, Ben, awesome. You'll say you'll look into skill timer. Great. Okay, so we need a thing, and then we want to call the thing, right? And so we want, I don't know that we need to be that glamorous about it. Let's go take a look at the API documentation and look at the names of events and let's see. And see if we get some inspiration for naming. Naming things is hard. I don't want to do it multiple times. Let's go take a look. So something changed, something changed. Okay, so if self.timer elapsed does not equal nil, then timer elapsed. Oh, self dot. Let's see if that breaks everything. Yeah, there we go. Oh, I forgot the end of that if statement. That will definitely mess things up. Okay, here we go. Okay, so we have self.timer elapsed. Now, if we come back into the row, then each of these timers, we can say self.Soliloquy of Spirit timers dot timer elapsed equals function. And then in this function, we're just going to be turbine.shell.write align timer I elapsed. And then end that function. Let's see if that will do what we want. So let's go ahead and start this up. And then, of course, downside, we're going to have to look for, we're going to wait for 45 seconds. Benrel says, coding it looks so complicated, I can't keep up. Well, I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you're sharing this time with us. I will say that I am bringing into this years and decades, technically, of experience looking at code and, more importantly, breaking code and doing something and it doesn't work and why didn't it work and, oh, how about this thing? So I'm bringing a whole host of debugging strategies into playing around with Lotro plugins. And so I would say if you ever want to try getting into this or understanding it, don't get discouraged if it is not immediately obvious what's going on. Sometimes it's not immediately obvious what's going on for me, and I'm the one doing it. But I also am practiced at it. Okay, now we waited 45 seconds. We can see timer 1 elapsed, timer 2 elapsed. Fantastic. We can have a callback called and know which timer we're talking about. That's fantastic. AZ says, what are we working on today? We are working on the Soliloquy tracker for minstrels because I'm very interested in being better at tracking what tier of inner strength, especially the tank has for those physical and tactical mitigations, and also how many Soliloquy of Spirits and how long they have for those buffs. And so the bar works, right? It's showing me the information. If I stick this on someone else, are they in range? Yes, they are. We can see it works on someone else as well. Obviously, I need to make the name label bigger, but everything else is great. But we can see that when the timers expire, they're not dropping off. And that's the thing that I'm primarily working on right now, is how do we know when these timers have elapsed and to do something with that. And we can see timer 1 just elapsed, and so we want to do something with that. Timer 2 just elapsed. Perfect. So this is where we want to go ahead and take advantage of this callback function here, timer elapsed. Now we need something to call, and so let's just make that a function. Function, Soliloquy tracker row, timer elapsed. I'm not sure this is the right place, and we'll just pass in I as that index of timers. That's probably not the right place. Handle Soliloquy, handle update UI. Oh. Yeah, we'll just add at the end. That's good. So timer elapsed, and we'll say timer index. Awesome. So we want to go ahead and copy the name of this function so I don't forget it. Oh, but we have two different. We have Soliloquy timer elapsed, and also we'll want one for inner strength, because that's just different enough. So, but we don't need the index for that. We only have one timer for inner strength. Okay, so let's go ahead, and instead of writing something out here, we can go ahead and say self : Soliloquy timer elapsed, and we'll pass in that I index that tells us which of the timers we have. We have 3 timers right now. And then same thing down here, actually. The inner strength timer, we want to go ahead and say self.innerStrengthTimer dot, what did we call that? Timer elapsed. And we're going to assign that to an anonymous function taking zero parameters. And we'll call self.innerStrengthTimer elapsed and end that statement. Okay, so we know that these functions are going to get called, and in fact, I stole that debug statement there. So we're gonna get some text when each of these expires still. And again, we were talking earlier about debug ability and how we have an enter combat and leave combat button now. It might be useful to be like, pretend like all the timers only have X number of seconds. Or we could say, hey, these things only have 5 seconds on them. Now, that's not a good thing normally, but look, this is going to expire very fast. Whoops. Neat. Okay, so that's an error. Let's go take a look here. Line 203 here. Oh, of course. I copied that and didn't actually think about changing the text. I was too busy talking is really the problem there. Okay, so we come back in, and what I'm curious about is, I think I just saw, okay, good. When it was crashing, it was trying over and over because updates hadn't been turned off. And we can see that in the timer control. We tried to do this first, and then we set once self-updates off. We need to fix that. We want to set once updates to false, and then we will try to call this one time. And if you crash when we're doing it, that's it. We're not doing it anymore. And then execution will stop there, but since we set once updates to false, it's fine. We did, as the timer control, everything we needed to do. So that was a priority thing. This thing has to happen, stopping the updates. This thing is lovely. If someone signs up and they want to do something, we will try. If they crash, they crash. Okay, perfect. And I'm glad we got a chance to see the brokenness of that. In fact, if we wanted to see it working now, if we come back in, let's go ahead and keep the bug. Let's say I is right there. We're going to go ahead and do a Soliloquy of Spirit. We're expecting after 5 seconds to see a single error statement because, yep, there we go. Updates got turned off first, then we crashed in that execution. Perfect. That's exactly what we want to see. Okay, so we are able to see that the timer has elapsed. Now, what are we going to do with that information? Well, what do we do when we add a soliloquy? Let's take a step back. Okay, handle soliloquy. Whoa, there's a lot of stuff going on here. So, if next spot, increment next spot, put new time in next spot, all sorts of stuff. The upshot of this is when a thing in spot I expires, and we always expect it to be the leftmost, but we don't have to care about that. Then we just want to shove anything to the right of it over, and then the rightmost thing should be nothing at that point. So we have an array of start times. We have the count, which we're going to need to decrease. So let me start making some notes here. So soliloquy elapsed. So we need to decrease Soliloquy of Spirit count. We need to move the start times, each Soliloquy of start times over by 1. So if the second one expires, we need the third one to come into where the second one is. Let's see. We will need to call update UI because that's what updates the start times. We need to call update UI. Okay, that's good. And then what else? What else happens? We have the count, we have the times. Times. Oh, the inner strength tier does not matter. It does not get affected by a Soliloquy of Spirit dropping off. And in fact, we don't care about that at all. Neat. Okay. So, example. Sometimes it's just nice to have to write out what you're expecting to happen. So example, 5 seconds left, 0 seconds left, 25 seconds left. Move timer index equals 2. So move free to 2. And you could imagine having more timers, right? Like this system is built to support stacking up to 4 or 5. One of these days, SSG might decide that as awesome as minstrels are, they need to be more awesome, even better at healing than they already are. Okay, so Soliloquy of Spirit can stack up to 7 times. And so we have made this so there's just a max Soliloquy of Spirits. It's currently 3, but if it were set to, I don't know, 5, 7, this might just work right out of the box. Let's take a look. I think the width of everything might be wrong. Yeah. Well, that's cool. It's obviously too wide. But the idea being, eventually, if they change that, I have to do less work. Exo says, I'd very much like to know why they chose to have Soliloquy of Spirit work like this instead of being a single tiering effect with the mitigations built in. Well, I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is inner strength is something you have to spec into, right? Like, you don't get that automatically. And so it might have been easier to implement as a second effect that procs based off of the casting of the first. The fact that inner strength can tier up, but Soliloquy of Spirit doesn't, I don't know. It's possible that each instance of Soliloquy of Spirit can crit, though, and then the rolling effect of that. And so it's actually beneficial for minstrels if each version of Soliloquy of Spirit can proc a crit when you first put it on, then having 3 chances to crit instead of just 1 is good. I don't know, just thoughts. But no, yeah, it being a fly on the wall of 14 years of developer choices would be both fascinating and really tiring. Like, imagine if you had access to all the notes from every meeting. It would just be so much stuff you don't care about for this one particular question. It's like, okay, how do you scan through 14 years of documents to find this one thing? Hello, Raiders from Manbear. Do watch out. Moobot is constraining people who mostly emote and don't have text. You can help combat Moobot's detection by combining emotes with lots of text. But welcome, Raiders. You have stumbled across Plugging Along, a plugin about Lord of the Rings Online plugins. Right now we're working on the Soliloquy of Spirit tracker, where, if the plugin is loaded, where as a healing minstrel, it's tracking these plugins for me to show me when my Soliloquy of Spirits are expiring and when my inner strength buff is expiring on whatever target I happen to be using it on. So we were apparently falling off a building. So excited. And so we were just getting the ability to clear these icons when they time out. So hopefully that's of interest to you. If not, feel free to ask any questions or put any comments you want to chat. And either way, welcome to the Lotro stream channel. Okay, so we were just looking at the Redhead says, we derail him with other Lotro questions a lot. It's true, but I don't mind. We were just looking at what the logic we want to implement is. If we have these 3 icons and one of them is expired, we would normally expect that to be the leftmost icon. That's how we've set it up. But just in case, we get the index of the timer. Let's say it's 2 in this example. That means we want to move the 25 over. If it was instead 0, 5, 25, timer index equals 1, then move 2 to 1, and move 3 to 2. Okay, so that's what we want to see. And we also want to remember to update the count when we're done. In fact, I'm not sure we need to keep the count at all. Whoops, don't want to drag it around though. So we want to go ahead and decrement the count. Just like before, when we were checking to make sure we didn't have too many, we don't want the count to go too below. So if the Soliloquy of Spirit count is for some reason greater than 0, if it's not greater than 0, we already don't want to decrement it. Otherwise, we're going to go ahead and -1 that Soliloquy of Spirit count. And that's a decrement. How many SOSs there are? Just before the raid came in, Exogenesis was saying, mostly wondering why you'd want it to produce 4 effects instead of 1. They do a lot, and effect tracking is definitely something Lotro struggles with. Yeah, I really, I don't have insight there. I do wonder historically, how long has Soliloquy of Spirit been around in this fashion? Is this like a couple of years ago, or has it really been around for a decade like this? I assume it may not have predated when they did the different trait trees, But if it's been around for a while, then maybe it predated their concern with effects. At least since HD, so minimum 7 years. Yeah. So were effect tracking issues as prevalent or as much on people's mind 7 years ago? I was definitely not involved in the community at that time. I only really got back into Lotro about 3 years ago. Okay, so we have to decrement. Excellent. That's done. We need to move each one, starting with timer index +1 over. So we actually have some sample code of what this might look like. Handle soliloquy. Shift each entry. Yeah, that's what I want. Nexo says they stopped doing raid content at that point, so number of people who cared for understanding class mechanics dropped off a cliff. When you say raid mechanics, you mean more than 12 or just more than 6? You must mean the 24 level stuff, right? '85 was the last raid for about 3 years. Oh, I see. And the 85 raids were a bit mess. So 85 raids would have been West Rohan? I'm trying to think of what raiding stuff there is around there. Erebor. I see. It's funny, when I first was getting back into Lotro, I'd get that pop-up, like the Road to Erebor thing, and like, I don't want to go to Erebor, I'm level 5 or 10 or something. It's like, I don't know why you're telling me to go to Erebor, but this does not sound like a good idea. I did not realize at the time that the instances were scalable, but it was a bit of a, what? Okay, so we need to move each one. So starting at the timer index that is expiring, we want to set its value to the next one. But what if there isn't anything else? What if there's only one? Okay, so first of all, we should set self.soliloquy of spirit timers timer index equal to whatever, 0 is fine. Although actually, because of the way count works, it might not even matter to move stuff over. That might be overkill. Okay, so what if there's just 0? Timer index equals 1. Do just decrement count. Potin says, hello. Well, welcome, Potin. You are in the middle of some frantic coding as we try to handle the timing out of these icons. All right, so we do want to call update UI. In fact, I'm just going to replace the comment with that because it's pretty obvious what's happening there. All right, so we had some examples. Well, I'm not convinced that's going to work, but I do want to see how it's not working. So let's go ahead and pull this up. So ideally, what's going to happen is that. That's cool. Let's see it again. Let's put up actually 2 of these. Ooh. Now, I've actually got the timeout so fast at 5 seconds that I can't get 3 of them up here. This is delightful, though. I'm really liking what I'm seeing so far. Let's go ahead and set the timeout to 10 seconds. And pop these up here. And we can see that we have 3 of them. Awesome. And then, boop. Oh, that's beautiful. Oh, yes. I am very happy with that. Now, we can see our output here just keeps saying soliloquy timer 1 elapsed, and that's because we have, by design, made it so that the shortest duration left is always on the left. So it's always in slot 1. That's fine. In fact, if we wanted to, we could only put a callback on the first one, just say the other 2 are never going to expire. They're always going to get shifted over. But just in case they do, it doesn't hurt to have that callback in there. But I can go ahead and remove that timer elapsed. Now these examples feel like overkill now that the code is there, but I'm going to leave them right there. It doesn't really hurt anything, and I could just collapse the function down if I don't want to see it. If your text editor supports syntax highlighting, it probably also supports collapsing of blocks. I'm using Sublime Text, but there's lots of variants that are better than the default of Notepad. Okay, so inner strength. What are we doing with inner strength? Well, in the handle function, we really just increase the tier, restart the timer. Okay, cool. What do we do to handle that start time? If show inner strength, show inner strength equals inner strength tier. Okay, so it looks like we just need to set that inner strength tier to 0 and everything's great. So inner strength equals 0. And let's go ahead and set that duration down to 5 seconds just for testing purposes. So default 45, default 30. Let's go ahead and unload, reload, bring this back up. Okay, so we see inner strength. Oh, well, it's elapsed. Oh, of course, we didn't actually call update UI, so the plugin doesn't know it needs to do anything. Let's try that one more time. Okay, so we use Soliloquy of Spirit. Inner strength, oh no, it's about to time out. Oh, that's so delightful. Let's go ahead and bring it back up. We can see we're at tier 2, and artificially it times out. That times out. That's so good. Okay, so we no longer need that debug that says we're in the function. It's great. Okay, so let's take a snapshot of this before I break something. So we go to our favorite source control program. I'm using Fork. If you want to try it out, it is at fork.dev. Otherwise, it's kind of annoying to search for. Find me Fork. Thanks, guys. Oh, for testing purposes, I'm not going to commit these clock changes, but we do want to go ahead and stage the callback. Okay. Handle when timers expire. And in the timer control, we want to go ahead and handle that. Oh, you know what? I just realized the comment in the timer control did not stick with the callback function. So first set once update to false, then call a callback function if it exists. Yeah. So that lets us keep the comment with the new code right there. Okay. It looks like we got everything that we're adding. So another thing that we need is to combine the checking of combat and the timers expiring, because if all the timers are expired and we're out of combat, we want to go ahead and get rid of this whole row, not just the icons. We want these rows to get rid of themselves. So we need to go back to our README file, because what's going on? All right, give timer a function to call when it expires. Done. Row should remove a time when the timer expires. Done. Now give rows a function to call when the combination of all effects are expired and we're out of combat. Okay, let's check that out. So the Soliloquy of Tracker window, let's see, we want to go ahead and function Soliloquy Tracker window, remove Soliloquy, and row. We're going to get the row itself. And then we want to do two things. Remove row from list box and shrink window size. And that's kind of it. So, but now we can pass this to the rows. So it is called, I'm struggling because class functions like this that take an implicit parameter self, I struggle with getting to work correctly. But I shouldn't. It should be fine. Okay, so the soliloquy row takes a player name. It's also going to take the soliloquy window. We're going to just save that off. So self.window equals soliloquy window. And then we can call self.window where's my function? Oh, yes, of course. Let's have a function. Soliloquy, tracker row, check for row finished. Okay, so we are going to have an if something something something, then we're going to go ahead and self.window, and we're going to go ahead and call remove soliloquy. That's what it is. Remove soliloquy self. Now, I have a concern because we have a circular reference thing going on. Window has a reference to the row has a reference to the window. So the first thing I want to do is break that circular reference in case it causes the memory manager problems. So we're going to say local window equals self.window, self.window equals nil. And now when we go out of scope of this function, the local window also goes away and there's no reference back to the window. And then we can go ahead and just use window, remove soliloquy, self, end. Okay, so what are we doing with this? So local, we have is in combat. So if not self.is in combat, really? Oh. We don't know if we're in combat, but the window knows if it's in combat. Is in combat. There we go. Okay. Local is in combat equals self dot window dot is in combat. Great. And then local timers expired equals, we know if timers are expired if the inner strength tier equals 0, and if the Soliloquy of Spirit count equals 0. So Soliloquy of Spirit count equals 0, and that. I'm going to actually break that out into a couple lines, make it a little bit easier to keep track of. So local row finished equals timers expired and not is in combat. By breaking out the logic into these pieces, we can kind of spell it out on almost human language what we're trying to represent. Because we could do this all in the if statement, right? We could say if not self.window.is in combat and not parentheses. So we could do all of that. But instead, we can just say if row finished, then do this thing. And we know row finished is if the timers are expired and we're not in combat. Perfect. So what we can do then is we can do a self check for row finished when the strength timer. I'm realizing we're going to stumble into a problem here, but I'll keep on for a second. So soliloquy timer elapsed. At the end of it, we're going to check if the row is finished. Inner strength timer elapsed. We're going to check if the row is finished because that might be the point where all the timers are expired. What we don't have, and what I'm realizing now we need, is that when the window is told that in combat changes, we need to tell each of the rows that that has changed as well. So we need a handle combat changed. And if we're going to do that, we might as well keep track of it. So soliloquy tracker row handle combat changed, and we'll save it. And then we don't need to check the window for that. We have it right here. But we still need the window to call each of the rows. The rows are only stored in the list box. So let's figure out where else we iterate through the list box. There we go. We're going to just lift that code right there. And handle combat changed. We're going to go ahead and, whoopsie, I took that code, but what is count? There we go. So we have a count. That's the list box get item count. And for 1 to that count, we're going to go ahead and get the row. And we're going to call row handle combat change is in combat. There's no response, and we don't want to stop early. We want all of them to know about that. Okay, so the window is told. It tells each of the rows. Each row knows whether combat is active or not, so it can do this check. And when combat changes, we can go ahead and close the loop here. We can check for the row being finished because maybe the timers were finished and we just left combat. So, remove soliloquy is going to get called in a couple of places. Right now it doesn't do anything, except I do want to know it's being called. So turbine.shell.writeLine will give us a standard output, and we'll just say the name of the function. Remove soliloquy, yay. Okay. Now the row, we are keeping track of the player name here. So I'm going to go ahead and concatenate row dot whatever I called it. Player name, excellent. Sometimes working in Lua, I'm used to a more object-oriented approach where you have private variables that you can't access out of the class, and this makes me cringe a little bit. It's fine, it works, it just like, in the back of my head. Okay. So ideally what we're gonna see, if I didn't mess things up, is that row won't disappear, but we'll get a debug output, aha, or an error message, that's also fine. Attempting to call something something. Let's go look at row line 255. Attempt to index local window a nil value. Okay, let's go take a look at self.window. Did I forget to assign it? I forgot to pass it, of course. Soliloquy of window. When we make a new row, add player, there we go. We want to go ahead and add self. There we go. And that disappears, still very awesome. Okay, we can see we got the remove soliloquy window called. Awesome. Now the one thing we haven't done yet, let's enter combat as far as the plugin is concerned. And let's do it again. Because ideally what's going to happen is we will not see that function called because we are in combat, and then exit combat, and, well, that's exciting. No, it broke again. Oops. Okay. Attempt to index local window. Okay, why though? Why? I mean, certainly it's not reentrant. Well, let's make sure we're not doing a null check there. Okay. Why did that happen? Let's go ahead and enter combat. I should have a debug statement, but it's probably fine. Okay, we exited combat, removed soliloquy. Awesome. Let's do it again. Let's enter combat, but this time we'll exit combat first. So we've exited combat. And so ideally what we're going to see is no, okay, so exiting combat first is definitely tricking this thing out in some way. So 2 things. I want to go ahead and have a turbine.shell.writeLine that we are in handle combat changed. I want to convince myself that's working fine. Is in combat. And then check for row finished. I want to go ahead and, okay, so turbine.shell.writeLine row finished, and we're going to dump the value of row finished. And I'm doing a dump because Boolean values don't write out very nicely, and the dump function knows how to handle that. Okay. Oh, in fact, while I'm in here, we're going to set the Soliloquy of Spirit duration to just 8 seconds. We'll save a few seconds that way. Okay, so entering combat. Oh, there we go. Okay, that's a problem. 240. Oh, that's exactly the problem I was just talking about. We tried to dump a Boolean value, and Lou was like, oh, I don't know what you want me to do with that. It's like, just write it out. It's fine. Just give me a 0, 1, true, false. I do not care. All right, but enter combat. We can see combat's changed to true. Row finished false. Exit combat. Row finished true. Awesome. Okay, that's working great. Oh, I think, of course, I know what the problem is. We haven't removed the row from the list, and so we're just getting a reentrancy thing there. That, of course. So if I hit exit combat here, enter combat, exit combat. Okay, so I was spoofing myself there. So in here, we should assume after this remove soliloquy is called that this object no longer has a reference by anything, and the garbage collector is going to come up. That's what we were assuming, but the window isn't doing that yet. It's just saying error. And so because it didn't remove it from the list, it just reused that row instead. And so that's not good, but we're going to fix it. So first of all, we want to go ahead and update size. Great. Row width and row height. So remove from get row size. So local row width, row height equals row get size. We want to go ahead and update size, self update size. Oh yeah, local is added equals false. This is a removal. We have the row width, row height. Excellent. Shrink the window size, and then remove the row from the list box. You know, this is the one thing where I wasn't actually sure what I'm going to do with that. So we're going to go to the API, and that's a little bit big. We're going to come back into the turbine.ui.listbox. And how do we remove something? Remove item. Type control. Well, that seems really easy. Okay, so self.listbox, remove row. Neat. Let's try that. So we load us back in. We get a Soliloquy of Spirit going, and we're not in combat. So ideally, when all the timers go away, that's so close. We did have a fatal error, but other than that, it was great. Attempt to call method remove a nil value. Okay. Okay. What's going on there? Because it's spelled remove item, the item is really an important part of that function name. Okay. I was all set to be really impressed. Okay, so we have remove item. We also have remove item at. We don't care about that because the row just gave us a reference to itself. We pass that reference off to the list box. We don't care where it is. And that was actually a key thing with the list box is if we have 7 entries, the 6th entry gives us a reference. We say, list box, take this out. I don't care where. And so ideally, we get to not care about where things are in this. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and do a Soliloquy of Spirit over there on Barius, and a Soliloquy of Spirit over on me, Affodil. Barius is timed out. Affodil? Oh, that's so cool. Now, what happens if we're in combat? Oh my goodness. Look at this combat. It's going to last so long. And I get myself and Barius there. Okay, Barius. I thought I said intercombat. Okay. See, this is what I get for taking that out early. Let's go ahead and come back in. Oh, of course, if you enter combat, the row doesn't know that. The row needs to be told. So, handle combat changed. When we create a row, which is like add player, that row, we need to add the combat state. So player name is in combat. Now this is a downside of having multiple places. And in fact, maybe I should just have a central function that lies, but a central function that's not local player, but would default to local player if we're not debugging. That's an interesting design choice because, yeah, having all this state means propagating it around and making sure it's updated, but the rows need to know when the thing changes anyway, even if they don't know what the value is. It's fine. This is good. Okay, so we need is in combat, and self.isInCombat is going to get assigned that value. But we do need to make sure that self.isInCombat gets passed, although we're passing the window. What if we just grabbed the values? That makes me concerned because I don't necessarily always want. Okay, so there's two ways. Self has the is in combat value. I could just rip it out of the innards in here. Like, okay, there's a Soliloquy window. I know there's an is in combat, but I might want to remove that someday in Soliloquy window. I don't want this to break because of it. So passing it as a separate parameter in here means that conceptually Soliloquy window might not know someday, and that might be fine. So I'm going to do it as two separate parameters here, but you could just as easily pass it as one and go get it from the window. You can even have a function, hey window, what is it? And even if the window's not storing it, it still knows how to get that for you. And storing it as a function makes it a little bit more obvious that Soliloquy window is responsible for that. Whereas a member variable, you're just like, well, it's a member variable of the window. No one else is going to care about this. And obviously I'm playing fast and loose with that approach here. Okay, so we have apparently run way over time in my excitement. That's cool. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and enter combat. We're going to go ahead and use the correct skill on our Thalion and on Affodil. We're not in combat right now, and I'm just spinning around so I have a darker background behind here. Wait, we're not in... I guess we were in combat. Oh, that's fascinating. We got a index out of range when we tried to do more than one at a time. Okay, neat. Let's go take a look at that. That's in Soliloquy Tracker window. And that's 53. Okay, handle combat changed. Oh. Ooh. Okay, so if handle combat changed causes the thing to be removed from the list box, that's going to be a problem. So a classic way to approach this is instead of going from the first to the last, is go from the last to the first. And then if the thing that you were just talking about is removed, you don't care. So I equals count to 1, decrementing by 1 each time. And then we're going to go ahead and do the same thing. We're going back into combat. Going to go ahead and put something on Barius. Go ahead and put something on Affodil. and we can see the rows are still here. And if we exit combat, they're both removed safely. The second one gets removed. We go look at the first one. Hasn't been affected by a reordering, and we remove that one. So that's sort of a classic fix. Another one is to save off ones that you need to do, and then you have a separate thing that's not number indexed or whatever. But this is great. This is very simple. A thing to watch out for in a zero indexed language is instead of starting at the count and going down to 1, you're starting at the count minus 1 and going down to 0, and that can be an easy source of errors. So this is a place where being 1 based instead of 0 based for your indexing, starting item 1 instead of item 0, made it just a little bit more clear. Okay, so that's cool. But what if we enter combat and put that up, and exit combat and put this up? Okay, virus is removed. Daffodils removed. Oh my goodness! This is looking like it's working. Okay, we've got 3 rows here. One went away. I've entered combat now. So these 2 are pinned in place because of combat. And then I've exited combat. Oh, yes! Oh, that's so exciting. Okay. That's just super awesome. I'm very pleased with that. So what do we have? We have a Soliloquy tracker. Magnuk says, what kind of keyboard do you have? It sounds nice. It does sound nice. I agree. I'm using a DOS keyboard. And technically the quiet kind, and yet. And I'm doing the all black keycaps. So let's go to DOS keyboard. Ugh. They've got all sorts of gamer-like versions, which are just not for me, right? It's fine. So the DOS keyboard Ultimate, it's probably an earlier version, like a 3 or 2. I've had it for a while. I definitely don't have that spinning wheel on the right, but it really is my aesthetic to just have a completely blank keyboard because I know where the keys are, and I switch between QWERTY and Dvorak. And so the keycaps are wrong whenever I'm in the other one. So if these keycaps came in QWERTY, it wouldn't be good for me anyway. And those times when I am in QWERTY, Dvorak keycaps would probably throw me off even more. And so, yeah, so these are with the cherry switches, and they're still noticeably loud. And I know what I'm about to. It's like if you're driving a car, you kind of anticipate the swerves, and so you don't get motion sick in the same way as if you're a passenger. I barely even notice the sound of the keyboard, and I am told that is not true for other people in the room. Absolutely, I use Dvorak. For those who don't know, Dvorak keyboard. Oops, layout. For those that don't know, yeah, sure, Wikipedia. Let's do it. This, of course, is a culturally contextual layout. If you're using Dvorak in non-English countries, it might look a little different. But Dvorak just puts the vowels and the common consonants on the home row. So you have AOE, UI, DHCNS on the home row, plus the hyphen. Why not? And then other characters throughout. So this is what I am typing with pretty much all the time. When I'm streaming, this is how I'm typing. QWERTY just doesn't do it for me. But, whatever gets you the results you want. Okay, so, oh my goodness, this is just so cool. Exit. There we go. Oh, and it did it. Oh, all right, so if I just go wild here. Minstrel's gone wild. Go heal everyone. Okay, so this is kind of what I envision from a raid-like experience. You got 12 of us on there. Maybe at some point I'll want to break it into multiple columns or something. I don't know. Oh, come back here. Oh well. Yes. Phew. Okay. But this is kind of what I have envisioned. And ultimately, I would love if I could click on the name and select that person if they're in range. That's a future project. But for now, I'll be using mini raids, so I'll be able to see, oh, that person, whatever. And of course, when combat is done, we exit. Those are all gone, and the next time I enter combat, it starts all over again. That's delightful. I am just so pleased with getting all those callbacks to work correctly. Ah, yes. Okay, now we still have this debug output here. And so let's go ahead and, let's see, shell. All right, so we have removed soliloquy. We're done with that. Any other shell calls? Shell? Nope. Okay, so that's good. If we unload or reload, we can go ahead and see that is gone. We have not entered combat. Nice. Okay. So all the debug output is done. Okay, so let's go take a look at our source control and see what did we change. We still have that helper function dump. Don't need to worry about that. And the options window still set to debug. What else do we have? We don't need to worry about those time changes. That was just for testing purposes. But the constructor now is in combat in the soliloquy window and saves both of them off. So we definitely want to commit that. We will check for the row finished. That was a mistake not to have it. We now have the handle combat changed. Oh, no, that was the addition of it. And the check for row finished. All of that is good. Stage that. And then in the window, we needed... Okay, we actually handled the combat change. We needed to pass those two parameters into the row constructor. And we have the remove soliloquy function. That's so good. Okay, so debug, debug, debug. So good. And then in the to-do file, we were tracking what we were doing. Give rows a function to call when all effects are expired. Function removes the row from the list box, yes. Shrinks the window in list box when removing a row. It probably does that. I think we told it to. In fact, if we go ahead and bring it back up here and click and drag, we can see the window is that size, yes. Let's enter combat to pin it there. Wait, you can heal the elf in Rift. Why can't you heal random town people? Okay, so if we click and drag, awesome. Let's go ahead and get that going. Exit combat, click and drag. Okay, so we can see the window size is correctly updating. Mogdog says, how does this commit work? It saves off the files to somewhere? Excellent question. So this program fork is using a source control repository, in this case, a Git, G-I-T, repo, and Git repositories, as well as Mercurial and other more modern repositories, are a distributed repository system. So I have my local repository, but there's also a server out there in the cloud that I can push my changes to. As an example, let's go ahead and we can see over here on the left, the Soliloquy of Spirit tracker branch. Now we can see there's all sorts of stuff that I've done, these little snapshot commits, but some of them have not been pushed out. These ones with the blue dots are still only on my machine. So if a lightning bolt comes through that window over there, hits my machine and fries it, I'll be very sad. These two changes are not out in the cloud. So we want to push those out to the remote server, and cool. Now, they're not just on my machine, but on the remote server. And if I was working with someone else, they could now pull down my changes and make use of them as well. And they could push their changes, I can pull mine down. So that's sort of a modern source control system. Distributed, there's not just the code in one place. It's on my machine, it's on GitHub, it's on your machine if you're working with me, it's on all the different machines. And it allows multiple people to be working at the same time. Okay, so I had just made a change. Was it an important change? No, to the to-do file, of course. I was looking at that. So give rows a function to call. Done. Oh my goodness. So let's go ahead and save off those to-do file changes, and the rest of it is good. So remove row when timers are done and out of combat. Oh my goodness, yes. That's so good. I'm going to be very happy playing around with this later this week as we continue to do level 50 stuff on Treebeard. I'm sure I'll spot more problems, but I had to resist not just going through and rushing through and getting some of this working this week because we were so close and now it's there. That's very cool. Okay, so just as we're wrapping up here, and I do think it's time to wrap up, I'm a little bit past my normal end time. So I'm going to work on wrapping up. So if you have any last minute thoughts or questions, do get them into chat now. But as that happens, I'm going to just review what's left. What would I like to do if I had more time, say, next week? Looking back, I'm not 100% sure I actually answered your question, or at least very well. Did that make some sort of sense? Okay, so things that I would like to do. If you have not seen it, let me go ahead and pull up Mini Raid. Okay, you say yes, that's awesome. So if you haven't seen it, Mini Raid is a alternative UI for showing you you and party members. So for instance, this is me, Affidel, and that is Rosenblum, who's off somewhere, probably doing stuff at the workbench in our kin neighborhood. When I click on Affidel here, it highlights me. And if Rosenblum was close enough, when I click on that, it would select her, which I think would be really useful in something like this if I could click on the row and be targeting that entity. And a stream or two ago, Baz mentioned that there's a thing called entity control that you can set entity with player object, but did have some caveats about memory leaks and performance loss. Now, I'm not too worried about the performance loss right away. This is only going to be for as many people as are in the raid, and Mini Raid seems to do really well with it. Mini Raid also has ways to kind of restart itself so that any memory leak issues don't persist very long. But so this is a thing to think about is entity control, so that I could in some way click the row in the Soliloquy tracker and just that highlights the person. Even better, I could even I could have the Soliloquy of Spirit right next to them, so I could click, 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 click. Oh. Okay. Sorry. I thought there might be a technical issue, but it might be okay. So, yeah, that's what's going on with my desire there is make use of this entity control. I've never used it before. I don't know how well it works or how to do it. Oh, hey, Rosenblum. So, yes, we can see here that when I click myself or Rosenblum, this passes through and selects that entity. Super, super awesome for what I want to do. So I'm going to investigate that. I'm going to keep an eye out for what Baz said to watch out for. And then, let's see. Also of interest to me is right now there's a control in options for minstrel buffs for use the Soliloquy tracker. But I think it's possible to know if the minstrel, are we a minstrel? If we're not, we should probably not do anything. But if we are a minstrel, do we have Soliloquy of Spirit trained? Because if we don't have Soliloquy of Spirit trained, there's no point using the chat monitoring and slowing down the game just that little bit to look at every combat message. So I want to use the get trained skills of the local player to know if inner strength has changed, and I need to pay attention to stance changed because I have it trained now. Can we detect if we change trait trees, question mark. That's a concern. Is I was thinking, this is the stance changing, I believe, but what about the class traits? Now, I do know, we do see you have acquired the trait, whatever, coming into a channel. Is that the advancement channel? Let's create a new tab and change filters advancement. Actually, yeah, okay. So when, there's a timeout. Every once in a while I think maybe 100 Mythler coins isn't that expensive. And then I'm like, yeah, it's kind of expensive. Okay, so when I come over here in advancement, you have acquired the trait, etc. So checking if it's trained and then keeping an eye on the advancement channel. But yeah, so you've acquired Soliloquy of Spirit. That's cool. But how do I know that you've lost it, right? So I could know what is that base skill that you get from Warrior Scholar Protection of Song. So I want to figure out, can I see trait configuration changes? Advancement tells us if we gain a trait or skill. And in fact, Soliloquy of Spirit's right there. Let's go ahead and you've acquired that. And then, what is the name of this? It's called Inner Strength. Excellent. So, where are you? Let's see. Watch resolve and firing finish. Blah blah blah. Inner Strength. Okay. So you have acquired the class trait Inner Strength. Neat. Good to know. So managing all that, knowing if the player even has Inner Strength or Soliloquy of Spirit, taking that into account, not having a performance impact, or at least not much of one, if it's not even possible to use Inner Strength, that kind of thing. Cool. And of course, before we push this out, we want to localize it so that each of these strings, you have acquired the class trait, blah, is localized so that someone can come in with French or German or Russian and swap in their own strings and without having to rewrite the plugin. So that's on the to-do list for the future, probably next Tuesday. Here that's the 28th. Excellent. So that's what's going on there. So I still think there's a few things to do, but we're rapidly approaching the end of development on the first version of this, at which point I'll package it up either as part of the Minstrel Buffs plugin or as its own little standalone plugin and ship it on out. Right now it's been kind of taking advantage of the Minstrel Buffs infrastructure, so the settings file and all that. Making its own plugin seems like a hassle. But however it gets shipped out, we're really close to that. Okay, I don't see any more questions, comments, or concerns in chat. So I think it is time to call it an end of the stream. With that being said, why is Munson just logged in? Okay, that's fun. Okay. Surprise. Okay, so with that being said, that's all we're going to cover today. Thank you so much for joining me on this exploration of Lotro plugins. I'm so excited. I do hope to see you next week. And until then, keep plugging along. All right, bye-bye now.